My name is Laura Plum. I'm from California. I've, since 2008, come every year to India. Usually I go to Rishikesh. I teach there at the International Yoga Festival. So I've been a yoga teacher now for 15 years or so. And I also teach Ayurveda. I teach cooking, and healthy eating, and healthy living. And I also teach and practice Jyotish, which is Vedic astrology. I thought maybe I could start by telling you a little story from a book that I'm currently writing. Would you like that? So this is the story of you and how you came to be. And so it's a journey. I'm going to ask you to, you don't have to close your eyes, you could if you wanted to, but I'm going to ask you to really imagine and go on this journey with me. But imagine that you are just lying up in the Himalayan mountains one night, one summer night, and you're looking up at the sky. And all you see is a black sky, and everywhere sparkling, radiant stars. And imagine as you look at that night after night after night, you begin to wonder, where did this all come from? Where does this begin? And you begin to cognize that in the beginning there was nothing. There was just that, maybe that blackness without the stars. There was, as our scientists now tell us, perhaps some sort of a bang, some kind of an explosion, some sort of noise. And what happens with an explosion is it goes like that. And what is this but movement? What is this going to do but create a fluttering wind or a wave, right? And that wave moves out in that infinite black, empty sky, creating movement. Ultimately what scientists call electromagnetism, pulsation, vibration, silent sound. And ultimately, movement creates friction. And friction creates heat. And heat explodes into fire. And a star is born. And now you have nothing but space, movement, and suddenly fire, a star. And then stars suddenly being born in all these infinite parts of this space, right? And there you are in the Himalayas looking at this, almost watching it come to happen. And as you see that space, and you see that movement, and you see that fire, a breeze comes up. The fire nearby that's keeping you warm suddenly takes that wind and becomes stronger. And you notice the light. And you realize that same thing in the sky that is the beginning of all that is right here next to you now. This breeze that we all feel, right? This warmth that we feel in our skin. Right? And what happens in a fire? What happens if you give something to a fire? Let's say wood. Sooner or later, it becomes ash. It's been transformed. If you put food in a fire, it cooks and it transforms. A potato that you wouldn't eat raw, now you could eat, right? So fire transforms, and in the fire of those first stars, the very first periodic element, which was hydrogen, is burned and becomes so hot that it transforms into the next periodic element. And each one is heavier than the one before it, so it drops to the center of the fire where it's hottest and continues to burn and burst into something new. And then you get hydrogen and helium and oxygen and iron and all of the elements that make up our world. And what happens? That fire finally gets so hot it explodes. And a star becomes a supernova, and it sends all those elements everywhere out into space. And what happens? Well, we have this principle that I call love. which scientists call gravity. It's that principle that pulls us together, each one of us being pulled together as couples, as friends. But these elements get pulled together. Two get pulled together, hydrogen and oxygen, and they make water. Others get pulled together, and ultimately they make planets. And they make a particular planet that's mostly covered in water. And that particular planet covered in water has all those things, space and air and fire and water and earth, just in the right balance. That even though it's an unbreathable place, just enough of those 5 elements are interacting for algae to grow and seaweed to grow, and ultimately marine life to grow, and ultimately more land to grow up with bushes and trees and grasses and plants. And something crawls up out of those waters. Animals start to grow on the land. And before you know it, one of those animals stands up tall and walks and reaches up to a tree and plucks an apple. And all of that happened, all of that beauty and all of that grace and all of that sparkling, miraculous life happened so that one day someone like you could evolve, or you, or you, or you, could come here, and everything would have come before you, so that you would have enough to eat, you would have enough to clothe yourself, you would have enough to do, to keep yourself interested and active, to keep yourself healthy and alive and inspired. It's as if from nothing to you, everything evolved on purpose, just so you could be alive, healthy and strong. And to me, that's the story of Ayurveda. And that's the way that the science of the Vedas and the science of the sages marries to the astrophysicists and the cosmology of today. It's to say that there's a trajectory. And yet it's to say, what a miracle you are. What a miracle we all are. We were born in the belly of a star. We emerged from nothing to something. And when my son, who is now 18, when he was 5 and 8 and 12 and 15, we used to go for walks on the beach at night. And we both loved looking at the stars. And he always knew more than me, so he'd point to the night sky and he'd say, well, that's such and such a constellation, or that's such and such a star. Or did you know that about the moon? Or this or that. And after we were so excited about all that was happening in the night sky, but exhausted with one more fact or figure or miracle, one or the other of us would look at the other and say, but what is the intelligence behind it all? Where did it come from? What makes it move? What made it happen? Where does your intelligence come from? We can see where the hydrogen and the oxygen and the iron and the carbon and all that come from. They come from the belly of a star. But where does your mind come from? What causes your thoughts? What gives you the capacity to digest information and experience? Where did the first intelligence come from to create the whole thing? This is the question that I think the Vedic sages and scientists were asking. They had a capacity, through their powers of observation, to see the nature of reality, to see everything as luminous, and to see that there are these 5 elements everywhere. But there's something else that matters too. What drives those elements? What drives those forces of electromagnetism, thermodynamics, and gravity? Vayu, Agni, and Soma, Prana, Tejas, and Ojas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Sat-chit-ananda. Sat-chit-ananda is the cosmic soul, the Purusha, projecting into the world as Vayu, Agni, Soma, electromagnetism, thermodynamics, and gravity. Do you understand? As the prana that is your life force, the tejas that helps you digest, the ojas that keeps you alive, strong in your body with a good immune system to stay healthy. Sat-chit-ananda is the essence of who you are. It's the invisible self that is the cause of all. And so for me, when we look at balancing our Vata, our Pitta, our Kapha, what are we looking at? We're really looking at, where did Vata come from? Where did Pitta come from? Where did Kapha come from? What are its gifts? How can I cultivate the gifts rather than focus on the deficiency? And even more than that, can I spend enough time, like we do here, in quietude? To at least touch the hem. See that beautiful skirt, this beautiful skirt, the hem of that intelligence that is the cause of all of this. That intelligence we call Sat-chit-ananda. Because when you are in touch with that essence of who you are, it's always in balance. It's always in balance. The essence of who you are is always perfectly in balance. And so, while Ayurveda is always seeking to bring us into balance, yoga is seeking to always remind us that the essence of who you are is always in balance, never out of balance. Does that make sense? These are how these fit together to me. One seeks balance. The other remembers that we are balanced. We are integrated beings. And I think that as we ask these questions about Ayurveda, we start to get into the fragments, the pieces of it. But I just wanted to give you a sense of the wholeness of it, the context of it. Okay? So that when we think about, should I have oatmeal for breakfast? Or should I have a green smoothie? Or what should I make for lunch? Or what dosha am I today? That we hold the vision that we are Sat, truth, Chit, brilliant, radiant intelligence, consciousness, and Ananda, which is not just bliss to me, it's life, light, and love. Sat-chit-ananda, it's the power of life, it's the power of light, it's the power of love. And there is nowhere, anywhere in the world, where you are not that, and where that does not exist, because that is what created the world, and that is what created this world, so that you could come alive in it, to know that you are that. Does that make sense? There's different ways of looking at the world, and what is it, and what is the purpose of being here. I think that in all the different philosophies that are realized, or seeking realization, self-realization, our purpose is to know who we are, and to know that we are the Sat-chit-ananda that is also the creator of all that is. And I think that that is purpose enough. In other words, maybe the world is doomed. Maybe. But it doesn't really matter if we all do our part to realize the true self, to get on the path of self-realization. Having said that, if we all awaken to our true nature, to our true self, then the world is luminous and perfect. I really like what Sri Aurobindo said, which is that as we are consciousness, and that consciousness created us to know that we are consciousness, we are here to creatively participate in the creative evolution of consciousness. So it's up to us. Will the world ever become a place where everybody here is walking as a saint and a sage? Well, you see, there's many lokas. That's not this loka. That's the next loka for us. But once we're realized, we'll be in that world. And what's beautiful is that the more that we are realized here in this life now, the more this world looks like that. That's why I think Gandhi said, be the change. Because then the change happens through our eyes around us. It puts the responsibility back in our hands, but I think it's hopeful.